Welcome back to Today Assets Report, the channel where we break down the biggest moves in crypto so you're never left behind. I'm so glad you're here today because we have a massive update that every single XRP holder and crypto investor needs to hear right now. We are talking about Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple, dropping what I can only describe as a Clarity Act bomb that has the entire crypto community buzzing. And on top of that, we've got updates from Patrick Witt, from industry leaders, from senators, from banks. The whole picture is coming together, and I'm going to walk you through every piece of it today so you know exactly where things stand. There is a lot happening right now in the world that could affect crypto markets in a major way, and getting solid regulation across the finish line here in the United States is without question the single most important thing that can happen for this industry right now. So buckle up, LES, get into it. Let's start with where things stood heading into March, because you need the full context here. The White House Crypto Council set a March 1st deadline, a hard target for banks and the crypto industry to come together and bridge the gap on the stablecoin rewards dispute. That deadline was pushed by Executive Director Patrick Witt, who has been one of the most active figures behind the scenes trying to broker this deal. Well, March 1st came and went, and there was no big announcement, no handshake moment, no press conference saying a deal had been reached. But here is the thing, and this is really important. Crypto stakeholders are not panicking. Industry leaders are publicly saying that negotiations are actively ongoing, that confidence remains high, and that a deal can absolutely still be reached even though that deadline passed without a resolution. This is not a collapse. This is a negotiation, and those take time. Now, there was a report circulating a few days ago that I covered on this channel, and it suggested that talks were actually breaking down behind the scenes. A crypto news outlet claimed they had an inside source at one of the banks involved in the negotiations, and that source said very little progress had been made. They also claimed that banks were essentially demanding that Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong step up and personally come to the table to help work out a compromise. That report caused a bit of a stir across crypto social media, and understandably so, because if the talks are falling apart, that is a big deal. But then the White House and other participants fired back and said, that is absolutely not the full picture. They insisted significant progress has been made and that the conversations are still very much alive and moving forward. But here is my honest take on all of this, and I've been following this story for months now. The core problem hasn't changed. We are still sitting here talking about the exact same issue that was holding things up 2 and 3 months ago, which is the stablecoin yield question. That is the sticking point. That is the wall everyone keeps running into. And until there is a real, workable compromise on that specific issue, everything else kind of stalls out. The Blockchain Association CEO Summer Messenger has been very active in the conversation on social media, and she posted on Friday that a banking side source with direct involvement in the ongoing meetings pushed back against the idea that talks were falling apart. According to that source, both sides are still providing input into legislative text, and the March 1st deadline was never actually binding. The source specifically said that over-focusing on March 1st as a hard deadline is a mistake. But at the same time, let's be real about what the actual disagreement is, because I want to make sure you understand exactly what we are fighting over here. Another banking source confirmed something very revealing. Both sides actually do agree in principle that stablecoin balances should not earn straight-up interest like a savings account. That part has some level of consensus. The problem is that crypto companies are trying to find creative ways to deliver yield to customers through the back door, things like membership programs, reward structures, and staking mechanisms. And the banks are saying no to all of it. They are not just saying no to direct interest. They are saying no to all of it, every single creative workaround that crypto has put on the table. And that is where the negotiations are completely stuck right now. Let me break that down even more, simply because I think this is the heart of everything. Imagine you go to a platform like Uphold and you buy $100 worth of RLUSD, which is a stablecoin. Uphold turns around and says, hey, just for holding that asset on our platform, we are going to pay you 3% per month, so your $100 earns $3 every month just for sitting there. Banks are saying absolutely not. Their argument is that this creates what they call deposit flight, meaning People will pull money out of traditional bank accounts to chase that yield in crypto, and that threatens the entire banking system as we know it. So crypto came back and said, okay, fine. What if the customer has to take some kind of active step, like staking or performing a specific action before they earn any rewards? Surely that is different enough from a savings account to be acceptable, right? And the bank said no to that too, so here we are. The banking side has been very specific about what they would actually accept. According to sources close to the negotiations, banks want any lending or staking activity to be active, verified, and time-locked, meaning it has to be tied directly to real investment returns and not just be a dressed-up version of interest payments under a different name. They are genuinely worried that vague language in the legislation will allow the crypto industry to essentially recreate interest-bearing accounts just by calling them something different. And honestly, you can see where that concern comes from. The crypto industry has historically been very creative with language and structure, and the banks know that. Meanwhile, the White House is reportedly pushing to resolve some of these finer details through agency rulemaking rather than hard legislative text. And the banks are not comfortable with that approach either because they do not fully trust that rulemaking will protect their core interests long term. And then there was an interesting development from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency last week that actually may have strengthened the bank's position in these negotiations. The OCC signaled in a proposed rulemaking related to the Genius Act that stablecoin rewards could end up facing tighter restrictions than the crypto industry had originally expected or hoped for. This is significant because it essentially gives the banking side more ammunition at the table. If regulators are already leaning toward tighter limits, the crypto industry may have less leverage than they thought when it comes to pushing for generous yield structures. Nobody knows yet exactly how long these yield talks will drag on, and they are already in their second month. But stakeholders on both sides and the White House are all saying they are committed to keeping the conversations going and finding a path forward. Now, here is something genuinely encouraging that came out of all of this. Multiple senators who are close to these negotiations have been quoted saying something very telling. They are not trying to make either side completely happy. And when you hear that coming from lawmakers who are actually in the room, that is usually a sign that a deal is getting close. Because in Washington, a compromise that leaves everyone slightly frustrated is often the only kind of compromise that actually gets signed into law. The Senate Banking Committee is reportedly eyeing potential markup dates in mid to late March, which would give everyone a few more weeks to hammer out the remaining issues. And there are still some big ones on the table, including DeFi and ethics provisions that have taken a bit of a backseat while the yield debate has dominated the conversation. Amanda Tuminolini from the DeFi Education Fund confirmed they are waiting to see what the next draft of the text looks like before making further moves. And then Brad Garlinghouse stepped into the spotlight in a major way, and this is the moment that really caught everyone's attention. Following all the reports of tension and the missed March 1st deadline, Ripple's CEO came out publicly and said the door to a deal is wide open. His exact message was pointed directly at the banks. He said the banks simply need to act in good faith and walk through the door. That is a powerful statement from one of the most prominent voices in the entire crypto industry. He was not panicking. He was not catastrophizing. He was essentially saying the opportunity is right there, and now it is on the banks to show up and take it. That kind of confident, forward-looking message from someone like Garlinghouse matters enormously for market sentiment and for the political pressure this puts on the banking side to move. And David Sachs, the White House's AI and crypto czar, added his own very strong public endorsement of Patrick Witt's work in all of this. Sachs posted that nobody is working harder than Witt to get the market structure legislation across the finish line, and he explicitly acknowledged that the crypto industry has already made major concessions on the stablecoin yield question. He called on the banks to reciprocate. That is the White House publicly calling out the banking industry and saying, look, crypto came to the table and gave ground, and now it is your turn. That is not nothing. That is real political pressure being applied from the top, and it signals that the Trump administration is serious about getting this done and is not going to leave the banks drag their feet indefinitely. Patrick Witt himself gave an update that I think people need to sit with for a moment because it paints a much bigger picture than just the stablecoin debate. He talked about ongoing interagency conversations happening right now with the SEC, the CFTC, Treasury, the OCC, the FDIC, all of the major regulatory bodies that touch crypto in any way. He said progress is being made across the board to bring crypto into the mainstream and treat it like a normal asset class. And I have to say, stepping back and looking at this from a high level, we are in a genuinely historic moment. For the first time in the history of crypto in America, virtually every major regulator is approaching this space with a pro-crypto posture. That has never happened before. And yet, retail sentiment is still beaten down. People are exhausted, and I think that is something the industry needs to reckon with honestly. Here is what I believe is actually happening with retail right now, and this is something I feel strongly about. The exhaustion is real, but a lot of it is self-inflicted. Too many retail investors got caught up chasing meme coins, got destroyed by leverage, got burned by the endless hype cycles, and now they have tuned out entirely. And that is a tragedy because the most important structural changes in the history of this industry are happening right now in real time while people are distracted or checked out. The infrastructure is being built. The regulatory framework is being negotiated. The institutional on-ramps are being constructed. And the people who understand what is actually happening, not the noise, but the real underlying progress, are the ones who are going to be positioned correctly when the next wave comes. That is why channels like this one exist. That is why you need to stay informed. One data point that really captures how disconnected a lot of retail crypto investors are from what is actually happening came from a Cointelegraph poll. On February 27th, they reminded their audience that the White House had set a March 1st deadline to resolve the stablecoin rewards dispute, and they asked whether the target would be met. And more than 51% of respondents said yes. More than half of the people who voted genuinely believed the deal would be done by March 1st. If you have been following this channel, you knew that was not even remotely close to happening. We have been covering this story for months. We have told you repeatedly that the gap between banks and crypto on this issue is real and significant. That poll result is a reminder of just how important it is to follow credible, consistent coverage and not get swept up in hopeful narratives that do not match the facts on the ground. There is one more piece of this puzzle that I think is critically important and does not get talked about enough, and that is federal preemption. Multiple policy experts and attorneys who have been deeply involved in crypto legislation have made clear that the Clarity Act absolutely must include strong federal preemption language. What that means in plain terms is this: once a federal law is passed governing crypto as a securities matter, that law needs to apply uniformly across all 50 states. Because the alternative is a nightmare scenario where you might be operating legally in Colorado, but you are considered to be breaking securities law in New York. And the money transmission issue makes this even more urgent because right now, if you are operating as a money transmitting business, you technically need a federal license and a license in every single state where you operate. And failing to have those licenses can constitute a federal crime. Getting this preemption language right in the final bill is not a minor technical detail. It is foundational to the entire framework. And as these final weeks of negotiation play out, you better believe this is one of the issues sitting on the table alongside everything else. Stay close to this channel because we will have every update as it happens.